One. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest in the ValuesJam guest session series. And Darlene, great to have you here. And to start with, please introduce yourself to everyone.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be with you and your audience today, Alan. It's such a pleasure and an honor. I'm Darlene Cunha. I've been a healthcare executive or in healthcare for more than 4 decades. Started out really at the bedside as a trauma ICU nurse, where I think I honed all my skills. Not only your skills, your technical skills, but your actual people skills, right? When people are at their most vulnerable. I've been doing this work for a long time, but my greatest gift in life has been the gift of my family. Married 43 years this year, 3 beautiful sons who keep me grounded, that are beautiful, faith-fueled human beings who give back to the community. If you so choose and you want to connect with me, please do so on LinkedIn. My contact information has ways that you can reach me, and I'd love to connect and learn more about you as well.
Great. And I'll just add to that, Darlene. We were just talking before we started to record, and I was commenting on how thoughtful you are when you respond to LinkedIn posts. So if anybody's thinking that they're just going to connect with you and you're going to say hi and that'll be that it's done and dusted, that's not going to be the case. And if you want a true connection, then I can recommend that you make contact with Darlene. So let's choose us a card, shall we? So I'm going to tip the cards out of the deck. There are 60 here, and I'm just going to shuffle them while you consider how many piles you'd like me to make in front of me.
Oh, just give me 3 piles.
3 piles, okay.
Yeah.
And they're going to be different sizes. And so pile 1 is on my left, pile 3 is on the right. So which number pile would you like?
1.
1. And I'm going to count the cards now. So we've got 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 19 cards in this pile. So a number between 1 and 19.
7.
7, is that your favorite number?
My favorite number.
Okay. So this is what your favorite number's given you.
Positive impact. I love it.
So our first question is, what does positive impact mean? And there's a follow-up question, or you could take the follow-up question first if you prefer. It's a bit more creative. And so what is it that positive impact looks, feels, and sounds like? So either start with the metaphor or start with the more technical answer, up to you.
So, what I think about positive impact, it's not always, results driven. Think about, I'm going to stick with the healthcare analogy for a moment. We look at metrics, we look at outcomes. Of course, we want to see them moving in a positive direction, but the impact you have with those you assimilate with, that you work with, your team, what is the impact you're leaving behind as a person? When you leave the room, what are they saying? Have you left that energy that wants to drive curiosity, that wants to drive positivity, that makes them fueled to make a difference? To me, that's positive impact, right? Because that is going to drive your results, your metrics, your outcomes, your key performance indicators. People respond to environments where they feel loved, committed, where there's compassion, where there's empathy. It isn't about showing up in a room and it's all about you. It's all about what are you going to get out of it, right? When you're even when you're talking to one person or a crowd, what is it? What energy do you want to leave behind that makes them say, wow, I'm glad I connected. I had a great meeting. Or, that gave me something to really think about. I didn't think from that lens, right? Because we all have our own experiences that drive outcomes. So how do we make a difference whether it's with one person or many. That to me is the positive energy.
Mm. I think it's probably because I produce a newsletter every month, and I've just signed off on the content for next month, and the topic is measurement and insight, funnily enough. And so you mentioning it, and I suppose it's top of my mind at the moment, but it is this thing about, yes, of course, metrics are important, but they're not the answer to everything, because exactly as you've said, there are some things that are not so easy to measure, actually, but that doesn't mean to say they don't have a positive impact. And you've
Right.
reminded me of a story when I worked in hospitality, and it's a five-star, imagine a five-star hotel, beauty spa at one end with a swimming pool, and then fine dining restaurant at the other end. In the middle is reception and business center. Jacobean Manor House, 200-acre estate with championship golf course, beautiful place. And I was walking through the spa area, and there was an elderly couple at the reception desk. And that was quite unusual, actually, because usually the age profile in that area was a bit younger. And they talked to the receptionist and then they walked away. And I was just curious. And so I asked the receptionist, what were they talking about? And she said, oh, they're driving to a village some distance away. And they were asking me if I knew how to get there. And she said, so I directed them to the business center and explained we'd probably be able to print off a map for them so that they could find their way. So I'm a bit childish at heart. And so I picked up the phone to Cheryl, who was in the business center, and said, I've got a couple of people going to be arriving in probably 30 seconds or 40 seconds. This is the destination that they're wanting. Can you print out a map? And when they open the door, greet them by name and say, are you going to this place? And so in the afternoon, I went to see Cheryl, and she said, you should have seen their faces. They're like looking around. Who's done this to us? They were so thrilled. And that cost nothing, apart from a little bit of putting dots together and wanting to create a good impression. And when you were telling or sharing about metrics, I was just that came to mind, and I thought, how could you say the metric is?
I'm going to tell you, Alan, we think so much alike. I'm going to share something with you. We had a section in our electronic medical record where you could enter freehand a comment about the patient. So the patient loves their dog, the patient enjoys gardening, or is a photographer, or whatever it might be, right? And so I made sure that every orientation I had, I talked about that section and how important it was to fill it in. I said, think about when you go to a hotel. They know if you request the newspaper under your door, or whatever it is that makes you happy during your stay. And when they greet you, they ask you, would you like the newspaper under your door, or what have you, right? So using that hospitality mantra, I said, our patients are our customers. They come back to this hospital because of the care, compassion, empathy, and kindness that we extend to them. We're creating that loving culture, right? Just like our staff don't leave. I actually had a nurse that told me, showed me actually a letter of an offer letter that she received from a competing organization. And she said, and I'm not going because you can't replicate this, right? So
Yeah.
going back to that piece about the electronic record, whenever I started a meeting, I said, tell me three good things. I want to know three good things. Tell me, something about your day, something about your family, and something about you, right? Tell me three good things. When you start a meeting off with three good things, people don't want to talk about the negative, right? You give them fuel and a foundation to be happy, to be kind. And so
Absolutely.
this nurse said to me, Darlene, I never took care of this patient before. I'm going to say the patient's name was Alan. And he had a dog, Jasper, that was his compadre through his wife's passing, his children growing up, etc., etc. That dog was everything to him. And she said, "Welcome back. I'm so sorry you're here and you're ill. We're going to take the very best care for you. But I have to ask you, how's Jasper?" And all his fear, she
Yeah.
said, you could just watch it drain away. He said, "You remembered?" He didn't even know that she was never his nurse prior. He
Yeah.
couldn't remember that. But
Yeah.
when you go back to what I say, sowing the seeds of humanity, when we continue to sow those seeds of love, of compassion, we are creating something bigger than ourselves. Because
Hmm.
if he leaves there, he's going to tell others, they remembered my dog. They remembered me. Even if we didn't, we connected those threads. And of course, the follow-up question is, how is he? How is Jasper? He forgot for a moment that he was sick. And then we could, get into that. But when you can start a conversation with a relationship, with something mutual, you open the door for hope. You open the door for possibility. And even if it isn't the outcome you wanted, you're on a journey with someone else. You're not alone. And to me, when you go through life like that, you're blessed. You're blessed. We got to sow those seeds. So I love that you did that with the map. That was
Yeah.
great.
And it's you mentioned that we think alike, and there are so many similarities between healthcare and hospitality.
Mhm.
Of course, healthcare has a much more detailed technical side to it, but the other side is very, very similar. And I remember a lecturer at university, and I studied hotel and catering business, and he said hotels and hospitals are very, very similar. It's just that there are more sick people in hotels. I've always always remembered that. And
That's
it
interesting.
is this thing about personal connection as well. Again, the positive impact, you just can't measure it and get a handle on it. Here's another story. So at that same hotel, we hosted a national golf competition, and it was sponsored by a major company, and their managing director was staying with us, and I was introduced to him. He then went out to play golf, and unbeknownst to him, the guys in the golf shop told me that he had a terrible shot on one of the holes, and his ball ended up in one of the car parks. Luckily, it didn't damage any vehicles. So I asked them to bring me the ball. And then we arranged a wash bag for him that was delivered to his room. And I put a note on one of my business cards saying, "Have you lost something?" and put the golf ball in the wash bag with the card. And when I saw him, he was, you could just tell that the business relationship, in a way, was at a superficial level. And all of a sudden, you're at a much deeper level of relationship just because of some shared fun.
Well, it's humor.
Yeah.
Humor, laughter, humor. It's another whole level of endorphins that gets released. And I get it. If I just can add to that, one of the very first patients I ever took care of, I'll never forget his name, Gus Peterson, and I can share it now. It's been so many years, and God bless Gus, he's passed on, but nobody wanted him. Absolutely nobody wanted this patient. And I can remember being the new nurse coming on to the nurses, into the unit, and they're all looking at me going, her turn. And I thought, my turn for what? Now, I won't tell you the whole story, but you enter the room and the gentleman is cantankerous. He's yelling, the lights are out, don't put the lights on. And I'm this young nurse. I'm like, okay, give me a moment. I step out and I shut the door, and they're all like grinning, going, good luck, right? And so I thought, you got this. right? He's not angry with you. He doesn't even know you. He's angry with what's happening to him and he has lost control. So so I go back in, I go, no more yelling. That's it. I'm not going to deal with it. You have to be kind. And so we started talking, and I said, do you have any friends? And he goes, no. I go, well, I see why. If you greet him like that. Well, he started laughing. I started laughing, and it broke the ice.
Yeah,
And it's sometimes all you need is a bit of humor and not to take things personal. When someone doesn't know you, you can't take that anger or whatever it is that is upsetting their day as a personal insult. I looked at it as an opportunity to turn it around, right? And I said, "Well, you keep talking like that, you're not going to have any people that want to care for you either." And he just laughed, and I tell that story so much because even in life, neighbors, friends, they may be having a bad moment, and I always try to find the humor in it, not to desecrate what they're feeling, but to get to add a little levity so that we can have a conversation. Otherwise, you have
yeah,
opposing energy, and what you want to do is find a place in the middle where you can both cry, laugh. Like I've actually been with a friend where I've stomped my feet like a 2-year-old and said, "That's how you're acting. Stop. Let's talk." And then she'll do something, and we look at each other and we both just break down with such profound laughter and tears rolling down our face and hugging each other and saying, now let's talk. What actually happened? And you gotta find that place, and it's okay. It's okay to use humor.
yeah. And the other thing that you're touching on there is that I think sometimes people are either unaware or totally underestimate their ability to have a positive impact on somebody else.
Yeah.
And I remember it was a training session, and I do this exercise where you basically ask people to start wandering around the room at random, and then you explain to them that you're going to shout out a number where 1 is low and 10 is high. And when they hear the number, they need to greet the person that's nearest to them accordingly. So, you set people off wandering around the room, and you start in the middle somewhere and then go down to 2 or something like this, and people are ignoring each other, kind of thing, and then ramp it up at the end. And then the debrief is all about, well, how did it feel receiving an 8 or a 9 greeting? And everybody's like, I loved it. And then comes the follow-up question, which is, be honest with yourself. What level of greeting do you give people on a day-to-day
Yeah.
basis? And afterwards, this guy who worked in the post room said, you've changed the way I think about things. I never realized that I could have that much impact, because in his head, he was just taking mail from one place to another. And all of a sudden, he's realized that he's crossing paths with all of these people that he can have a positive impact on. And that's when, in the work that I do, that's one of the biggest thrills I get, is when lots of people who are really close to the customer start to realize the positive impact that they can have through their personal behavior. And like I say, it seems for whatever reason that people vastly underestimate that.
Ellen, my brain is racing. I'm listening and I just want to go, I want to reach through this screen and give you the biggest hug, right? And I'll tell you why. I had a conversation earlier about the beauty of children, the simplicity of children, how they greet each other. They don't look at what is around them. They don't look at race, creed, color, religion. It's so simple and loving, right? How you greet people. I go back to when Quint Studer, everybody knows Quint Studer in healthcare. I will tell you, if you don't sign on and look him up on LinkedIn, he's well known. But he said early on in my career, your greeting is the most important thing you can give someone, right? How you greet them. Think about when you walk into a store, if you walk into a hospital, if you walk into a doctor's office, or any place that you are putting yourself, are you greeted? That's going to set the tone for the day. So I take it a step further. He said if somebody is 6 feet away, you look at them. When they get 3 feet, you say good morning. You may extend your hand or just smile. What I do, I'm a Caritas coach and leader, which is Caritas just means love in action, right? How do we express love in action? It's not necessarily romantic, but it's just love, right? So I might say, good morning, Alan. Oh my gosh, if nobody's told you today, your smile just lit up this whole room. Thank you for being here. What do you think that's going to do to you when you walk away?
Absolutely.
Or good morning, Kathy. My goodness, you look beautiful. I love that sweater on you. It brings out your eyes. Have a beautiful day. Kathy walks away like a peacock, right? And it took nothing to say it, 5 seconds. And if you greet people on an elevator, I'm in hospitals all the time, and I step on an elevator and I go, good morning. And people will look up from their I go, oh, good morning. Everybody looks down. They don't want to say hello. And then in comes this burst of energy. That's a 10. That would be me. Good morning. And they go, oh, good morning. Good morning. How could you not say good morning? Right? It's just
Yeah.
simple
But
hello.
what happens in Values Jam, you won't know this, but I know it from experience. What happens is that previously hidden or maybe nearly lost memories suddenly come to mind. And when I started to notice this happening frequently, I ended up speaking to a psychologist in New Zealand. And what he said was because values led conversations go deep, what might be happening is that previously lapsed neural pathways are being sparked, which is causing a memory to come to the surface. So, and at the moment, I'm looking to engage with people working in the area of dementia and Alzheimer's because if it can be helpful in those areas, how cool would that be? But anyway, the that's the kind of preamble to this story which you've just caused to come into my mind. I was working for an investment bank in London. We had two buildings not very far away from each other. The building where I was based, we had hired a training company to come and do some training for some people in the supply chain, and I wanted to greet the trainer when they arrived. So I set off to get to the other building, which is where the training was being delivered. And as I walked past the station, there was a lady with a box that was a little bit too heavy for her, not or a wrong size and weight, let's say. And we were walking in the same direction, so I said, "Can I give you a hand?" So she gave me the box, and we're walking along. I get to the building where I need to go in, and I said, I need to go in here. How much further have you got to go?" And she said, "Oh, I'm going in here as well." So I said, "Okay." Okay. We go up to the desk. The receptionist says, "Nice greeting, and how can I help you?" She says, "I'm delivering some training here today." And so she said to me, "You've just given me the perfect introduction to my training."
Isn't that beautiful? And see, that's the beauty of humanity. We don't even realize sometimes the impact we have, that small little moment of kindness, what it meant. It's so I'll give you I'll kind of expand on that. I was in a large healthcare organization and they said, "Oh, just follow the yellow line." So I'm following the yellow line on the floor to get to where I was going. And of course, halfway down the hall, the yellow line stops. So what do? I ask the next person. They said, "Oh, you missed your turn. You have to go back up and then go to the right." So I go back up, I go to the right, and I have no idea where I am. Large, large, large healthcare organization. So by the third person, I said, you're my third person. She goes, "I have the time. Let me take you there." What a difference. And
Yeah.
so the whole time we're chatting and we're going, we realized that we knew similar people. We were connected in other ways we had no idea. And I said, it would be wonderful in your next meeting if you shared this event. That sometimes just taking that 2 extra minutes to walk someone, help them get where they're going. Now, I'm capable and can walk. What about the elderly person with a walker or a wheelchair, right? They don't always get the assistance they need. But if we just say, hey, I've got the time, let me take you there.
Yeah.
It took 2 minutes to get me where I was going. And I used to tell my team, if you tell me you helped someone get to where they were going, it's okay if you're late for this meeting, right? That to me
Good for
means
you.
more. That to me means more.
Yeah.
We'll catch up. We can catch you up. But if you're helping someone else, isn't that the heart of why we do this work, right?
And that's leadership, right? Because when you deal with situations like that, people know what the priority is for the organization and for their leader. Whereas if you're of a mindset, so a classic is there's nobody here to talk to a customer because they're in a meeting.
No. I hear you. We can't find someone or we don't have enough knowledge to be able to give that. I used to have a resource book to say, you know what, I'm not the expert, but I'm going to help you. Don't leave them with nothing.
Yeah. And we've touched on a number of different things, and we've compared hospitality with healthcare, and I use a phrase which is the hospitality mentality, because if you've got that, irrespective of what setting you're in, it will serve you very, very well because of all of the examples that we've covered. Now, let's get back to the metaphor question. So, when you think of positive impact, what images come to mind? What feelings come to mind? And what sounds come to mind?
So, images, I think of light. I think of, like a burst of energy, a spark. I always talk about leaving that spark behind. Um,
Hmm.
when I think about so images, when I think about feelings, you walk away feeling good. You walk
Hmm.
away wanting to do good. That if something was done to you, you want to do it for someone else, right? It's giving back. That's the energy piece. So images, how I feel, and what was the third one?
Sound. Any sounds come to mind?
Sound, laughter. Um, I think easy conversation, where there's an exchange of ideas. That to me is positivity. We're not shutting somebody down. If there's silence, that's not positivity, right? You have to welcome in conversation, welcome in a difference of opinion so that you can grow and learn and expand how you're looking at something. And again, I go back to children. What do they do? Why? Why? Why?
Yeah.
We think about that. Why, Mama? Why? Right? And I always reflect back on the innocence of whatever work that we do. What is the foundation? Why did we build what we built? Right? That to me, when we can, is how we shape positivity. Right? If you're doing a new process, a new policy, and you're creating a new structure for a department, how do you keep your team positive? How do
Hmm.
you help them to grow with it? You have to have the humor, which we had earlier. You have to be able to greet each other and share those ideas. You have to be the light. You have to emulate what you want them to emulate. So that's how I think about positivity.
Great. Thank you, Darlene. And so to respond, I found my brain in two halves. So when I was thinking about the image, one was the hockey stick graph, of showing that you'd had a positive impact. But the other one was people going, wow, and not really believing that this had been achieved. Because actually, maybe I should have mentioned this earlier, but something about positive impact that I'm personally drawn to is when you're able to create something from nothing. It's kind of, for me, that's different than when you have a load of resources, either people or money or whatever, and then you put it in place and then you get the result. But when you're putting maybe dots that are in different places together and then be able to create something when there was nothing really in place at the beginning, I get a real kick out of being able to do that. Um, just a quick example: when I was 17, I was a member of a local environmental group in the city where I was born and brought up. And I remember sitting in the pub and everybody saying, what sort of things can we do? And I suggested a garden sharing scheme. So we put a free ad in the local newspaper looking for two types of people. One who had a garden but didn't want to work it, and two, people who wanted to grow fruit and vegetables and didn't have a garden. And we ended up pairing 20 pairs. And
Wow.
so from nothing, it's like, so that's just an example of that. Um, Sounds, I guess I did the wow thing. Feelings, yeah, this thing about having created something special and also that will be remembered. I remember meeting just on the street in London somebody that I hadn't seen for about 7 years, and we had worked together in a bank. And she said, those were the best times of my professional career. And it's like, yes, that's a positive impact. Nobody will remember our financial performance, our
Mhm.
guest satisfaction survey, but she remembered that that was the best time of her professional career.
Isn't that something? A few years back, I started creating a breakfast for all of the original people that we started our careers with in the ICU, in the intensive care unit, the trauma unit. And that is exactly what we all said. These were the best years of our career. We grew up together. We raised our children together. We got
Mhm.
married. We had showers. We celebrated birthdays. We even celebrated deaths, right? Like we were there for all the highs and lows. That to me is family. Family isn't just whether or not you're born through genetics, it's who you welcome into your heart and into your inner circle to share those precious moments.
Yeah,
And when we went around the table, one of the things I said was, you have to ask or share a moment that you remember that somebody around this table gave you that you still pull on to this day. And we all shared something wonderful and beautiful and positive. So when I walk away going, I had no idea that that meant that much to you. So
yeah,
we never know those seeds we plant, right? We just never know. But they're special. They are
yeah.
special.
And there's a connection here. So you just talked about we'll never know about the seeds that we plant. And then just now, you remember when you gave me the example of the person, if they need to direct somebody, it means they're going to be late for a meeting, then you're okay with that. I have a theory that it's kind of developing, so it's not very finessed, but it feels to me like we pay too much attention to the known. So I know that I'm supposed to be at that meeting in 10 minutes' time, and that's all of our focus. Whereas if we give ourselves the latitude to walk with that person for 10 minutes to see them where they are, who knows what good might come of that?
Mhm.
And so I've been playing with a couple of questions over probably a couple of years now, actually. One is to ask people, and let's do it with you. So imagine that everything that is adds up to 100%. And what I'd like you to do is estimate the percentage that represents the known and the percentage that represents the unknown. And when you add the two together, they make 100, right?
That's tough, right? I think that's tough because the unknown is infinite, right? It's infinite, right?
Yes. So
So
what's your answer?
the unknown is like 100%, right?
Okay.
And well, maybe 99%, and the known is 1%. I mean, we have a vast um, world and vast experiences. I mean, it's just infinite.
Right. So,
So
so you're absolutely in line with what people generally say. So the biggest percentage for the known that anybody has ever said is two, and
I see why.
you're at a similar level to somebody who said, well, it's 0.0000, that kind of thing. So that's the first question. Then the follow-up question is, okay, so if that is true, and on the evidence of all of the feedback that I've received from many people, it would seem to be. why do we focus almost all of our attention on the known?
Comfortable.
Yeah, and it's a false sense of security because the known
Sure.
doesn't pan out as we thought it was going to do anyway. So my suggestion is to people that take a chance and dive into the 98% whenever you can, because beautiful things are waiting there. It's just that you don't know.
So I'm gonna share this with you. Simon Sinek
Yeah.
um, gives a talk, and he says, that I'm gonna paraphrase here, but somebody once said to him, "I would follow you if out of nothing but curiosity."
Hmm.
And so I thought about that, right? And I recently had a colleague say to me, "You know what, Darlene? You know what I love about being around you is that you've never stopped being curious." And so I know that even if I didn't know where you were headed, I would follow you out of curiosity because you don't get bogged down and compartmentalized. You're always looking for that exit. How do we get to the next level? How do we stay curious? How do we grow? Who haven't we met yet? Right?
Yeah.
When I became a director of nursing, I said to my managers, "You need to connect with a manager in the hospital across the street." And she was like, "What?" I said, "You both are on medical surgical units. You're both young leaders. I want you to make a phone call and connect and go for coffee. Have her over here, you go over there. But you have to stop branching out from what you know because what they're doing over there, you may be able to take pieces of that here." And so I was doing that, I'm going to be honest with you, back in the 80s, right before it was sexy, right? Because back then, if you held on to everything as a leader, oh, they couldn't fire you, right? Because you
Yeah.
have the knowledge. And I'm giving the knowledge away, right? I'm like, go into my credenza, take whatever you need. I have all these articles. I had the library bringing up things because for me, if I stayed in that cocoon where I was, the big kahuna, I was the big fish in the little pond, right? I was never going to grow. So, that old saying, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yeah.
I fully believe that.
Yeah.
And so I only hired people who were so much smarter than me because I didn't want to be doing their job and mine and telling them what to do. I wanted them to share with me and help me grow and just tell me what you need, right? So when you have that sort of mentality that you're always growing and you're curious, you can't fail.
Yeah.
Because even I always look at failure as a lesson, right? I don't fail, I learn, right? So if you look at failure as a lesson and not as a failure, you're a win-win.
Yeah, for sure. And well, you're opening up something else here. So I got a bit of a downer on the words success and failure because they're just too emotionally laden. And often we've just made what we think was the best choice. And it's not because of our choice, really, that the outcome has happened. It's because of circumstance, right? And
Correct.
yet we then go and label it, it was a failure or a success. Well, no, it wasn't really. And similar to the question about the unknown and the known, I ask people to think of something that they regard as a huge personal achievement. And so when they've done that, I then ask them to be honest with themselves and consider the contribution that they made personally to that outcome versus the contribution from other people and also just happenstance. And usually they realize that it's not really a whole lot to do with them, which, I don't know whether that's cruel or not, but it's enlightening, some people have said. And there's something else that, oh yeah, the sharing of ideas. I was working with a supply chain as about 16 different companies, and we set up a regular schedule of meetings. And for the first one, I invited everybody to bring an example of best practice that they would share with the rest of the people. And some people saying, but it's our best practice, so why should we share it with somebody else? So I said, okay, fair point, but this is the deal, right? How many ideas are you bringing? And this guy said, well, one. And he said, and how many ideas do you have the potential to take away? And he said, 15. So is that a good deal or not a good deal? Okay.
Love that. I love that. And as you're saying that, I go back to again, I'm gonna go back to children, right? When they say, "Oh, you've raised beautiful children," I said, we as a community raise beautiful children because it takes a village, right?
Mhm.
The core values and your belief system, yes, that is inherent as a family, but who they socialize with, the community of people they're with, their friends, right? It takes a village, your neighbors who babysit, your
Yeah,
relatives who step in. It takes a village. Takes a village in healthcare. Takes a village in any industry. Any success does not rely on one person. And I'm gonna leave you with this, right? Or this thought. When you talk about sharing best practice, I actually had a few best practices that were adopted by my state that I live in around safety. And when Katrina happened,
yeah,
right? So we got together in our state of Massachusetts and we came up with a best practice for creating a safety plan for healthcare organizations. Well, it was supposed to take 6 weeks, it took 6 months, and it was a group of us that put this together. And I had colleagues. Now, I traveled across the country in the United States in one of my roles, and I'd been in 30 different hospitals. And people had said, "Do you have a best practice on this? Do you have something you could share?" I'm like, "Absolutely." Because here's the deal. I may live in Massachusetts on the eastern part of the United States. You may live in California on the western part of the United States. What if I get sick in California?
yeah,
Wouldn't it be wonderful if some of the best practices we had out here were actually being practiced out there as well? We're not supposed to hold on to best practices. That goes back to the leader that says, "Oh, I don't want to give it up because, then it knocks me down," right? I'm not the leader. You lead more when you share, when you
absolutely
invite
right.
others in. So it is,
Yeah.
you know, I'm a big proponent of what I have is yours.
Yeah. And actually, you reminded me, and earlier you mentioned the 80s. Do you remember Tom Peters?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so I loved his take on best practice, and I don't know whether you've heard him talk about this or not, but and again, I'll paraphrase this time, but basically he says best practice, of course, it's a good thing, but the way a lot of organizations go about it, they could do a whole lot better because what they do is they say, oh, we've got to find best practice in this area, and then they go out and spend a year finding the best practice. And then they come back and they spend a year working out what it is of the best practice they're going to implement. And then they take a year implementing the best practice, which is now 3 years out of date.
So very true, right? It's so very like we just hinder ourselves because we get stuck in the muck, as I say,
Yeah,
right? We're
yeah,
still mucking around. If you're not willing to take risk, if you're not willing to step in, think of, the very best successes that have occurred across all industries didn't happen overnight. They failed forward, right? It's like it was a lesson. So we can't expect to adopt a best practice and roll it out over 3 years because exactly it's dead. It no longer is relevant, right?
yeah.
You get
And
stuck at
that and think that that was then when things were moving at a much slower pace than they are now, right? So yeah, it's crazy. So
the
we're going to wrap up now, and there's always the same question at the end of a values jam, which is, what are you encouraged to do differently about positive impact as a result of this conversation?
So, I tend to stay within the healthcare realm. I've been branching out. I've been really connecting with people and trying to understand their industry a little bit better. Um, Tech people, IT people. Um, how do we come together to really drive positive change, to really implement positive change, um, and to be open to understand and to be sensitive to others' perspectives. So for me, personally, I'm all about positivity. So, for me, I'm trying to put myself in different communities of people within my community, whether it's a senior center or the church, or maybe one of our food banks. I'm trying to get out more and do more of that work. So to drive positivity, for me, it's just making myself more available, making myself
Okay.
more
And
available.
I would encourage you to do that because when I came out of hospitality, I was really shocked at how lacking that hospitality mentality. And I mean, you're talking about exactly the same thing, but I was shocked at how lacking that was in many industry sectors and how much they benefit from it actually. So I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised at how much value you can add in those sectors where maybe you don't know so much technically, but doesn't really matter because this stuff makes such a big difference, right?
Yeah, I'll share this with you. There's a gentleman who reached out to me again because I happened to comment on one of his posts on LinkedIn, and it's about cybersecurity. And he talked about governance of cybersecurity when you're talking about sitting at the C-suite, where all the executives of a healthcare organization sit. Do they really understand cybersecurity and what are they doing? And we talked about the healthcare industry and what it meant with cybersecurity. And he had never thought of it through that lens. And so,
Right.
and me looking at it from his lens and bringing in that piece, his next piece that he wrote, and he writes pretty frequently, brought in the human side of it and not just the technical side. So adding that layer of what I say caritas, that layer of empathy and compassion, we can never forget the foundation of the human spirit. And if we do that, I think we're going to eventually win. We may fail initially, but we will win.
Yeah. And what a brilliant note to end this values jam. So the human spirit and my takeaway from this session is to keep on reminding myself of the positive impact that you can have because it is one of those things that unless there's a constant reminder, we all fall into autopilot, right? And when we do that, we do things less well and less well than we're able to, less well than we should be doing. And so a constant reminder just to take the opportunity to have a positive impact on other people's lives day to day. So Darlene, thank you so much. I'm going to bring this to a close now, but you are now a qualified values jammer.
Well, it has truly been my pleasure. And thank you for the honor to be able to share these insights, to tell our stories, and to connect heart to heart. It's really been wonderful, Alan. Thank you.
It has. Thank you.